Welcome to another edition of The Growth Game. I'm Paul DeLuca, CEO of Meritus Capital. We're really pleased today to have Nicholas Capman on with us. Today, we're going to get to know each other as well as continue to jump into some interesting things that are happening in the business and kind of pattern matching what we can do to add to our careers. So thank you so much for joining me today. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul.
So I love these starting these recordings, these podcasts when we're just getting to know each other because it makes for it seems like it always takes on an interesting tangent. But I'll just give a quick little background on me and love to hear about you, and then we can kind of talk about our businesses a bit. But I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I had a specialty staffing company in the 90s. I had come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I don't come from banking. Which is kind of different for a financier. But I was an entrepreneur and had a staffing company. Grew that, ended up selling that, and deciding that really I wanted to be part of the journey of entrepreneurs. And so it's been really enjoyable. I've financed about 800 staffing companies over the years, and I've done a number of M&A transactions in the 2000s. And so everything I do, I wake up every day. I love what I do. I eat, breathe, sleep, staffing and staffing growth and talking to entrepreneurs that are doing interesting things. So that's my background. I own a accounts receivable finance company now, and we finance high growth startups all the way up to our largest clients doing about 40 million a month. So we have a pretty wide range. But I'd love to hear about your journey and how you got into this business, and then dig into some of the things you've been doing.
Sure. Thanks for that introduction. My background is different. It's very unusual. So I actually went to college to be a high school history teacher. When I graduated, the state of Massachusetts was going through budget cuts. So they were laying teachers off, not hiring. And so the closest state that I could find a potential job was South Carolina. And so I told my grandmother, I said, "Hey, Grammy, I think I might have found a job. It's in South Carolina." And she said, "Oh, you can't leave." And I said, "I can't?" And she said, "Of course not." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so that 7-second conversation completely changed the whole trajectory of my life. So
Wow.
needless to say, my first job out of college was selling phone service door to door. And the company that had employed me had hired all recent college graduates. So the talk in the office was get 2 years sales experience under your belt. Then you can go and apply for pharmaceutical sales positions, selling pills to doctors, and that's where the money is. So I said, okay, sounds good to me. Got my 2 years, started applying for sales positions in the pharma industry. But instead of getting hired by a pharmaceutical company, I ended up getting hired by a multinational pharmaceutical engineering firm that was owned by Novo Nordisk, and I was placed as the head of North American business development at the age of 23.
That's exciting. But you left, you got thrown into the deep end.
Yeah. And so when I tell that story, a lot of people say, "Wow, that's really impressive." To which I respond, "You should be less impressed by me and more repulsed by the person that thought it was a good idea to make a 23-year-old head of North American business development." So,
right.
So anyway, I did what most 23-year-olds would do. I made a lot of mistakes. I learned a lot of lessons. While I was there, I decided to get my MBA. And I had a professor that said he had started his first business, which was a bagel shop at the age of 26. And I said, "Well, I'm 26, so I have to start a business." So I created this concept, which was the FDA Group. My goal was for it to be a side hustle. I wanted to make an extra $15,000 a year. And so I used to run it out of my car in the parking lot during my lunch break. And the company kept doubling and tripling every year. And after about 4 years, I decided I should probably just stop everything else and just focus on this. And here we are today.
That's exciting. Wow, what a fun journey. Thank you so much for sharing the whole journey. It's, there's an interesting pattern that I've noticed when I interview executives and entrepreneurs in this business. And it's interesting that I very rarely find anybody that strategically decided to be in the staffing business. There's always this story of something else that pushed him here, and many have made incredible wealth for themselves and their family. They've built unbelievable businesses and careers, but there was always that moment where something kind of pushed him this direction. It sounds like you had a few very interesting ones, starting with your Grammy. I love that. She said, "No way, you're staying local." That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I was just reading a letter that my mom sent me the other day, which was pretty interesting. She sent this old email that I had sent to my father back in late '90s, and he was trying to convince me to come back into the family business, and starting this whole finance company and growing this thing. Like, this is just, it's too much, it's too difficult, that's not your background, like, come back in with me. And she saved it, and she just shared it with me the other day, and it was like, wow, it was one of those moments where you look back and your whole trajectory of your life could have changed, but sticking to that one decision made so much impact. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you started the business out of your car as a side hustle, and you've grown amazingly. Tell me about how you've navigated the business. So you started out side hustle. You became an entrepreneur, I guess, at 26. That's wonderful. How have you really navigated your path, and where has it got you to today?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is it's really building blocks. I forget who said this, but somebody said that when people look at entrepreneurs, they always see the yacht, they always see the
Yeah.
multiple houses, they always see the fancy vacations, they always see all that stuff. What they don't see is everything it took in order to achieve that level of success, right?
Right.
And I guess for some people it can happen overnight, but I think for most entrepreneurs it's really building blocks, right? So I
Yeah.
started out with two people. I had to learn. I started out knowing nothing, absolutely nothing. And I remember one of the decisions, I knew I knew nothing. And so one of the decisions I made was to join a CEO advisory group called Vistage.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
remember how much of a fraud I felt and how I didn't belong, and how as soon as these people find out how ignorant I am, they're going to kick me out and all that kind of stuff. And, I went in, and it was as opposite as you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
These people saw this opportunity to grab me and mold me and help me, and they wanted to just the exact opposite. They wanted to help, right?
Yeah.
And I've been a member for 10 years, and now
Yeah.
I feel like I actually just wrote a book called The Passionate Workforce. It's coming out in Q2. And
Exciting.
now that I'm in Vistage and we get new members, it's it's the cycle. It repeats itself, and you see these
Yeah.
people come in and they say, they want to contribute to the conversation, and they say, I know I really have no experience to offer, and I really shouldn't be speaking up, but if I was going to say something, this. And we say, listen, you got to give yourself credit. We all started where you were,
Yeah.
and give yourself some grace, allow yourself to speak freely. We all were sitting in that same chair, and so on and so forth. I guess, to try to get to the point that you're making, it really is the journey of a million miles starts with one step, right? And that's really what it
Right.
is I started it in 2007, and it's just been one tweak, one addition, one nugget that I learned, one add-on that I made, one fact that I uh, learned, and so forth and so on, and it just all accumulates into this knowledge base that creates an organization, and it never stops, right? And in
Right.
fact, one of the quotes in my book that kind of made it into the promotional materials is I live in a constant state of being comfortably uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And really what that means is I'm comfortable in the sense that I know what I'm doing, but I'm
Yeah.
always uncomfortable because right now I'm not doing something that if I were to be doing it, I would be more profitable, I'd be more successful, I'd be helping more people, but I don't know what it is yet. And so I'm a
Hmm.
detective and I'm trying to figure out what's that next thing that I don't know today that hopefully I'll find out tomorrow, next week, or next month.
That's exciting. Yeah. And just something that you can be slightly more productive at, something you can be, just improve and tweak a little bit. I love what you said. And there's a few things that really resonate with me. Something that I have found is a pattern for successful entrepreneurs is number one, what you said about don't expect it overnight. Like you said, that is the exception. It's not the rule. Success in business comes from being diligent long term and building block by block and having setbacks and staying at it, right? So I really appreciate the long play is generally what makes a successful entrepreneur. I really love something else you said, and I really appreciate. I talk a lot about that in my content that I don't think it's talked about enough, and that is successful entrepreneurs have a humility that allows them to approach things with decisiveness when they've acquired the information that they're ready to make a decision on, but a humility to gain the information that they know that they don't have. And I, by and far, most successful entrepreneurs have that kind of a humility. Sometimes that's not, we don't see that. Like, you see the entrepreneurs that are propped up in the promotional material, are propped up in this country. Many of them do not display a humility. But I think some of that is really, it's just kind of a brash PR scheme, most of it. And I think a lot of it's just, again, it's the exceptions, not the rule. So I love the fact that there's a humility to it. And in the third one that just absolutely resonates is being open and ready to bring in mentors and be able to bring people in that can help shape your career. And so those things resonate with me, and I'm a huge believer in those. So thank you for highlighting that. I think that's something that I see is definitely a pattern. Probably 95% of the successful people I talk to display those three traits or knowledge in a different way. So
Yeah,
thank you
it's interesting you
for
say that.
highlighting.
So we have 5 core values, and we use those
Hmm.
to hire, fire, and promote. And
Okay.
one of them is being humbly confident. And
Yeah. Ooh,
so
that's a great term.
so you need humility, but you also need confidence.
Well said.
And you kind of also mentioned something that I'm going to rephrase it, or
Hmm.
maybe slightly take a step to the side and talk about vulnerability. So you're probably familiar with Brene Brown.
Hmm.
And I think the CEO or the leader or the entrepreneur that portrays themselves as flawless and perfect, they're not going to get the most out of their people.
They're not.
It's going to have the opposite effect. In fact, one of the things that I found is beneficial for leaders is when they're having to give constructive feedback, pointing out an example of where you have made the same mistake in the past shows
Yeah.
them that it was okay that they had made that mistake, just and don't do it again, right?
Right.
So
Right.
assuming that it wasn't something overly egregious, but
Right.
hey, you made this mistake, and because right off the bat they feel very defensive and, oh my god, is my job and at risk and all that,
Right.
and totally understand why you did it. I've also made that same mistake, and give a story, and it's
Yeah.
fine. Here are some ideas about how to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's a great tool. Great tool for
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah. And then the other thing you were talking about was another thing I heard that I think is really important for people that are in leadership and entrepreneurial roles. And it's so funny. I was really glad to hear this because for a while I thought I was just not good at business. Which is over the course of 10 years, you're going to have 6 okay years, 2 bad years, and 2 good years.
That's,
And
that's about the exact percentage of my business life.
isn't
I'll buy into that. You're
isn't
about
that
right.
about
Yeah.
right? I mean, give or
Yeah.
take,
Yeah.
and
It's true.
obviously there's going to be
Yeah.
exceptions to the rule.
Hmm.
But I think for anybody
Yeah.
that is running a unit or a business,
Hmm.
if you can say give or take 6 okay years, 2 bad years, 2 good years, and you look back and you can say, oh, okay, I'm not that bad. Because I'll tell you,
Yeah.
everybody, especially, leaders and CEOs, they say it's lonely at the top. We've heard that a million times because it's not a lot of places to go in order to,
Hmm.
and you talked about going and speaking to mentors. There isn't a lot of places to go. And that's why
It's true.
mentors are so important. And sometimes you don't know what that bar is. What is
Hmm.
normal? Am I
Yeah.
normal? Am I
Yeah.
am I not normal? Am I bad at what I'm doing? Because on the outside, on Instagram, on the internet, everybody just
Hmm.
seems so successful. And here I am, I'm
Right.
worried about cash and payroll. And, I lost a
Yeah.
client and this and HR and all that other stuff. And God, I've got, I really must not have anything under control. And then you speak to other people in similar positions, you find out, no, actually, we're all going through these challenges.
Right. I love that. Successful people are, which is one of the main reasons why I've been putting out so much content, and one of the main reasons why we push forward with this podcast, because I think that you get a lot more transparency in real conversations, and it helps you to realize that vulnerability, that not necessarily self doubt, but that self awareness that isn't just the PR is really important, and it needs to affect our day to day decisions as successful leaders. So that's great. So I'm sure you've had some obstacles and challenges. I'd love to hear maybe what was one of your biggest obstacles, and how did you get through it?
I don't know if this is the biggest. This is certainly going to be one of them. It just happens to jump in my mind. So rather than, wrestling with my mind, I'll talk
Yeah,
about this one.
yeah.
It was the largest deal I had sold to date. It was a
Hmm.
seven-figure deal. Actually, I don't think I had ever sold a figure deal
Yeah.
until this point. So it was
Hmm.
it was massive. I was a small company, smaller, and I was actually on a 2-week vacation in Brazil when we
Ah,
won.
yeah.
And the company that had awarded us the contract didn't understand didn't understand they hadn't purchased anything like this before.
Okay.
Now, they needed 17 people full time for a year
Hmm.
starting next week with all of these qualifications.
And you were in Brazil.
And I was in Brazil. Right.
Oh, that's a
Right.
fun challenge. Okay.
And so now these were former. So I'm the CEO of the FDA Group. So these were all former FDA regulators. So they were
Right.
former
Okay.
FDA investigators and
Hmm.
compliance officers, which makes it even more rare.
Sure.
So in order to actually staff that, you need 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, right.
You,
That
you
would be a
can't
normal process,
you
right?
can't do that in a week. But again, I don't they had never purchased anything like that, and that was the expectation. They said you won, you start next week,
Yeah,
and and so that I was 1 week into my vacation, and that was the end of the vacation.
yeah,
It stopped right there and then.
yeah,
And
yeah. Right.
I don't know how I did it. I really don't know how I did it. Somehow I did it, and
That's
we
amazing.
and we did it, and that was
Wow.
probably one of the biggest obstacles I had to overcome was just staffing
Yeah.
that project.
That's great. I love it. That's really that's a great story, honestly. Um, does anything in that experience affect, did that affect you long term from a strategy perspective, or was there something that you gleaned from that that has shaped you or shaped the business even to today?
Unfortunately, not, because I didn't know
Hmm.
that that was their expectation. What I would
Got
like
it.
to tell you is that
Hmm.
I knew going in that was their expectation, and moving forward, I would have set the expectation up front about what the
Right.
timeline is to staff a project like that. But they never told me when the start date was until they awarded the
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
And
Let me
it,
let me guess. You now make sure that you have clarity on those bids what the start date is.
well, I the reason I say I don't think they had ever bought anything like this is
Yeah,
because I
they didn't.
haven't come across anybody that ever had that expectation before.
Got it. Yeah, that's an
So,
unrealistic expectation.
again,
Sure.
I'd like to tell you that I set those expectations, but
Yeah.
truthfully, I don't,
Yeah.
because nobody's ever come to me with that level of expectation before.
Totally. Right.
So,
Right. It's great.
so I'd like to say that I've learned something from that, but that was just a unicorn. That was just a once in
Totally.
a lifetime kind of random thing, and it was a very competitive bid,
Yeah.
and it was there was an underlying sentiment that if you don't come through in a week, we
Hmm.
are perfectly comfortable ripping the contract away from you.
Wow.
So
Wow. It's
it,
very
it
unrealistic. Yeah.
it didn't feel there was no and now again I'm a small company. I think I had just
Yeah.
started full time.
Yeah.
It was the biggest deal I had ever gotten. Like there was all this. I'm in Brazil. I don't want to push back because I'm pretty sure they're just going to rip it away from me. So, I didn't
Yeah.
really feel like I was in a good place to be negotiating. So I just said, all right,
Yeah.
it's time to,
Did it.
tell my wife it's up to you and the rest of the family to handle the
Yeah.
kids because I'm staying in the
Yeah.
hotel.
Got it. Put your head down and just start recruiting.
Yep.
That's pretty fun. That's a
Yeah.
good story.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how would you, and by the way, what size have you grown the business to today? Or how many employees, or, what, some kind of a macro outside looking in, kind of where is the company at today,
Yeah.
geographically or size of employees?
Yeah, so we are 11 million in revenue.
Hmm. Great.
Our Yep. So and then we use a mixture of W-2s and
Hmm.
1099s. Our
Yeah.
industry is a little bit different than a lot of other industries
Hmm.
because the requests that we get from our clients
Hmm.
are very, very specific.
Sure.
So one of the examples
Hyper focused, hyper specialized,
hyper
obviously.
focused, hyper
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah.
Um, one of the kind of good examples is, recently I was talking to somebody about radio pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
It's a very
Wow.
niche thing.
Sure.
People want in my industry, people want experience on things. They want you
Hmm.
to have experience on things that haven't come out yet.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
this weird.
Yeah. Well, that's totally,
Yeah,
totally backwards. I never would have thought of that. Sure.
it's like a catch 22. Well, the technology
Sure.
hasn't come out yet, so how do you get experience? But
Wow.
so in
Yeah.
any event, and the projects tend to be relatively short. So
Hmm.
it's unlike a web designer, which I that's kind of my go-to analogy. Where if I can
Hmm.
write this website, I can write that website, and yes, there is a level of specialization. I'm not saying there
Sure.
isn't, but in my space, it's just a little bit more. I need, I have this list of requirements,
Yeah.
right? And in order, so we have 2,500 contractors
Uh-huh.
in
Wow.
order to satisfy the needs of an $11 million business.
Wow. That's
So,
very, very unique. Wow. Wow.
that's why I explained that it's
Yeah.
very they have very very unique specific needs, and
Yeah.
so you have to be able to have access to that level of talent in order to
Yep.
fill those needs, and that's kind of where we're able to be successful because it's very difficult for other business, and there are competitors, of
Uh-huh.
course, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. I was talking to my executive team. There's not a lot,
Right.
and there aren't a lot because it's a very weird space
Yeah.
where you need a lot of access to talent for these very short term projects.
Right.
And unlike in other industries where, like IT, if
Hmm.
you've got, how many levels of, and I know there's all different, degrees and certifications and stuff, but they can do lots of different things in lots of different projects. And it's just a
Yeah.
little
No,
bit
that's great.
different in my space.
It sounds like a great business. You've built a great business, and I love the highly specialized companies. I think they're sticky, they're valuable, they can be very profitable. And I speak a lot about making sure that there's a clear focus to the business plan and has some specialization. And so that that sounds like you've really done that successfully. So great job. It's exciting. I'm curious what your how would you describe your leadership philosophy if you walk into your mentor group and you said, listen, this is my philosophy on leadership, what would that be?
Respond with urgency, make it happen, communicate with radical candor, be humbly confident, and be easy to work with.
Yeah, those are great terms. Excellent. So let's talk about something different. So AI, do you have an AI strategy? What do you think about it? What do you think AI will do to your industry?
Yeah, very interesting. I had a feeling we were going to touch on this. So,
Yeah.
in my Vistage group, there's another person in the staffing industry. He's more on the
Hmm.
recruitment. Um,
Hmm.
so, while we do offer recruitment, it really makes up a very small percentage of our business. We're mostly consulting and
Sure.
staffing.
Sure.
But it's still sourcing, recruiting, so on and so
Hmm.
forth. And so we were in Vistage, and we're all everybody, right? Not just us in the staffing and
Hmm.
recruiting world, but we're all, what's up with AI? What's going on? So
Hmm.
I looked into I looked into one technology, and then there's another technology that we're looking into. And I don't know if you've heard of any of this. One of them is, I think, Phenom. Have you heard of Phenom?
Heard of it. I've done no research myself, but I have definitely have heard of it. Somebody else
Okay.
brought it up too. Hmm.
So in their qualification process, when you reach out, I think they say you need like a minimum of 750 employees.
Wow.
So it's pretty expensive, but
Yeah.
somehow it's a
Hmm.
recruiter. It does sourcing and interviewing and can
Wow.
do CVs and submit them. I don't know how it does it, but we're
Yeah.
too small in order to be able to
Hmm.
take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So that's not something that we're geared toward. Then I heard there's a CRM system called Bullhorn that is
Hmm.
popular in the staffing industry. We haven't looked into that, but I heard that is
Yep.
kind of the popular one. We use
Yeah.
HubSpot currently. We
Got
transitioned a
it.
couple of years ago from Salesforce.
Hmm.
Um,
How has that transformation been from Salesforce to HubSpot?
Probably like you would expect. It wasn't a nightmare,
Mhm.
but things got lost.
Yeah. A
Yeah,
little messy.
a little messy.
Is the end product a better product for your business the way you run it than what you had in Salesforce?
I spent so much time in Salesforce.
Yeah.
It's my native language.
Yeah,
So
it's so
it,
funny talking. You're talking to I can't even remember. Act was the CRM before I went to Salesforce, but I've been a power user of Salesforce for about 16, 17 years, and just like you, like I live and breathe it. I'm a
yeah,
CEO that lives and breathes data, right? And
yeah,
so yeah, it's like everything that my business does. But a lot of people don't understand that. But everybody say you got to go to HubSpot. You got to go to HubSpot, and I'm just like I'm 50. I don't know if I actually want to start over. But anyway,
yeah, yeah. It depends
yeah,
on how deep in a Salesforce you are. So
yeah,
we use it for basic stuff, right?
yeah.
Very very simple reports.
Hmm.
Nothing that's too customized.
Yeah.
And, just your basic opportunities, tasks,
Hmm.
contacts, and stuff like that. So really, there wasn't a whole, gigantic customization and engine in Salesforce. So for that reason, it was pretty easy to move over to HubSpot. If
Yeah.
if you've put a lot into Salesforce, then you probably can't get out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's a very it's interesting. You do obviously they get you. It's very once you become very entrenched, it's a very difficult thing to transform. And yet, I am seeing technologies that are have areas of focus where they succeed much better, right? And so it's how do you really build a cohesive system while adding extra significant value? There's some obviously some AI tools that are really interesting. There's data tools that are really interesting. And now it's how do you take that and bring it kind of back into your normal infrastructure? And that's I think what all of us, small businesses to larger businesses, are dealing with is the technology transformation is happening so quickly that it's hard to be able to get the advantage of that incremental productivity lift and be able to layer it over your current legacy systems. That's really difficult. I will shout out to Bullhorn for I've had many clients that have made the switch and are on Bullhorn, and it is amazing piece of software. There's some other great pieces of software out there for staffing companies, but I do know Bullhorn is making some big investments in AI, and I saw that at the last conference, and I know they're really
Which
pushing things.
conference was it that you went to?
I was at the American Staffing Association
Okay,
conference
yeah, that's
last
the
year,
one
which they were
my
at.
colleague was telling me about. Yeah, and that's coming
Got it.
up in
Yeah.
October, right?
That's coming up in October. I'll be
Okay.
there. My team will be there. If
All
you're
right, I
there, I'd
might see
love
you
to
there.
connect. I would love to. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, definitely shout out to Bullhorn. I think if I was a staffing agency, I would definitely be making moves to find something more specialized, and I've seen my clients do that very successfully. So that'll be interesting. So everything you do is very you're innovating, you're building blocks, you're doing everything to be very customer centric. Do you keep your customers very long term, even though there's lots of new
Yeah.
projects? Is it okay? So you're building multi-year
Oh yeah,
relationships.
big time. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. In
How do
fact,
you? Mhm.
well, go ahead. Ask your
Go ahead.
question.
No, no. I was going to say, how do you, as a business owner who's grown to a nice size, that's a beautiful size company, by the way, how do you maintain those relationships long term in this digital world? Like, how do you maintain the human element while people have, society has become more used to communicating in a digital fashion, and there's been such a push. I think so many of our kids are having challenges with this, such a push away from the human connection to a digital one. How do you maintain those relationships?
Okay, so I'll share some of our, I guess you could say, secret sauce. So the human element will never go away.
I
It's
agree.
just changing. So there's also as you learned from my introduction, I'm a salesperson by background.
Yeah, right.
And but I've also purchased a lot from salespeople, and I've had the opportunity
Hmm.
to work with good salespeople, and I've had the
Hmm.
opportunity to work with bad salespeople. And by being a buyer, it's given me a lot clearer perspective into good and bad by being
Hmm.
on that other side of the table. And one
Right.
of the things that I found was really useful in building and farming a really good relationship is when the salesperson is there for me and
Mhm.
doesn't disappear
Yeah.
until I've stopped buying. And
Right.
they don't ask if I need to buy anything else every time they talk to me.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we've done as an organization is first we'll have our client and then we have our consultants. So, we'll have check in calls with our clients on a cadence that they find is appropriate. Generally, in the
Okay.
beginning, it could be weekly or monthly. Usually, it's about weekly because any issues are going to happen in the beginning. So the, the
Yeah.
the 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 best thing is to catch it quick, nip it in the bud, fix it so it goes away forever, right? And you
Right.
want, I don't care how small it is, because small ones snowball into big ones.
Yeah.
And then we'll pick a cadence with our consultants so that we can kind of get the inside scoop. Plus, we want to keep them happy, because if they're not happy, they're going to leave, and that leads to an unhappy customer as well.
Right.
So we don't have sales representatives. We don't have business development people. We have what we call account managers. And
Yeah.
they are there to hold our clients' hands throughout the life cycle of that project. And
Mm-hmm.
so they don't, when they sell the deal, they're always there. How are things going? What else do you need? How is your son's christening? You know,
Yeah.
how was your trip to Italy? Did your, company fix that cybersecurity issue? And it's just about building step by step, building blocks. You're not going to build a relationship like that. It takes time.
Right.
It's face to face. It's built over time. And then
Agreed.
and then I think the definition of trust is character times competency. So
Yeah.
if you can
Great.
demonstrate your character and your competency, that's how you build the trust. So that's how we've done it.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I love that. I also like the fact that you've got continuity in the sales process and the customer relationship process moving right into the servicing. I mean,
Yep.
that's very important in this business, and I've seen that really does keep that continuity long term. So you've cracked the code on that. You've built a great business. Where are you going to take it next? You're going to try to grow it, or what's the next 5 to 10 years look like for your business?
That's an interesting conversation. So we are going to be looking to go into a process. So we're looking at bringing in some capital so that we can quintuple the size of the organization.
That's exciting.
Yep. And so I actually I don't want to get too deep into it, but I essentially got my number and
Okay.
then didn't move forward.
Yeah.
Now, what we need to do is we just have to grow it a little bit more. And so,
Got
one
it.
of the things that we've been doing is looking at some very small consultancies in addition to
Hmm.
continuing to try to grow in this economic climate that we have.
Got it.
The nice thing about this climate, though, and I don't know what you're seeing in your space, but it is a down
Hmm.
climate from our
Yep.
perspective. Um,
Hmm.
but never let a good crisis go to waste.
I agree.
We saw one of our biggest competitors get out wholesale, just
Yeah. Wow.
left
That's
completely.
exciting for you.
That's exciting. We had another one of our hugest competitors that has overhead galore that just doesn't have any work. And so,
Wow.
but you can't just say, oh, we don't have any work. Well, you're going to have to
Hmm.
cut and cut and cut and cut. And then what happens once
Right.
the work comes back? So we're at the beginning
Yeah.
of the bell curve. So we see it
I
coming
agree.
back. Yeah. So that's the good news. But right now, kind of that whole rattle that we've seen over the past, I don't know, 12 months,
Hmm.
it actually could be a good thing long term for us. So
I love that. I think that you're taking that you're turning it into an opportunity. And I've been preaching that. I think this last 12 months has been transitional, but the people, this is the time to maneuver to grab market share. So I'm very
yeah,
bullish about the industry, as
yep,
it sounds like you are. So I'm super excited to hear that you're making those moves to take this thing to a place, to get to your place, your number, so you can take it all the way up. And I love that you're doing that. I've been involved in a lot of M&A in the early 2000s. We kind of, as a firm, we stopped doing that in 2008, 2009. But I've seen a couple $1 billion of M&A pass through our hands, and we financed over 800 companies. So we have a pretty broad perspective of seeing this, over now decades, and seeing what it looks like before that bell curve happens. And I feel like everybody's kind of held their breath. Everybody's taken this last 12 months to go, what's going to happen with macroeconomic conditions? There's normalization going on in the marketplace with staffing after the pandemic. And, so that kind of this year or so has been the time that I've seen the best entrepreneurs planning for the next cycle up. So love to see that you're on the Growth Game podcast talking about growth. I love it. So let's talk about growth. What scares you about growth?
I guess there's two ways to answer that. One way I'll answer it is I'm scared in the same way you and I were scared the first time we went to a middle school dance, right?
Oh boy, you just brought back a flashback.
Yeah. So like
Yeah,
a little,
right.
it's exciting and nervous, right? Me and my executive team, we call it, we're ready to move out of our mother's basement. So it's been great that we got to 11 million, hit that 8-figure mark. That's great. But we've been floating around there for a little while, and we hit that proverbial $10 million, dollar plateau. And so, we're ready to kind of move on, and we know how to do it. We're an EOS company, definitely scalable, feel very strong about our ability and our culture. So, but again, I'm 100% owner, and so it's all fully funded through me. I can't hire 70 people tomorrow. So, so that's why we need that outside capital. So one of the things that I guess scares me, but is exciting, is I've never led a $75, $100 million company. So that's part of it.
Right.
The other thing that is scary is the marriage. I have been married for 14 years, and my wife and I, hit the 10-year mark. And in my opinion, when what happens at 7 to 10 years is couples either divorce or they get stronger. And I was the benefactor of becoming stronger with my wife. So that's great. When it comes to finding the right partner, I want to make sure that it's the right marriage, and you can do all of the things all the diligence that you can, and there still is that chance that it wasn't the right fit. So that's one of the things that scares me.
I think you articulated that really well. And I think that's really important that you are being patient in this process and really looking at those things as the challenges, the possibilities of why these things kind of can, end up not being the right experience, especially because this is your baby. Like your business, it's like raising a child, and you've had this thing since 2007 that you started, you birthed out of your door, your car door. So it's a very difficult thing to do, to make the decision and find the right partner. So I wish you the best in your selection process. And I would say this, and I appreciate you've already at least intimated that you made this decision, but the number, when you decide to really grow a business, whether you're bringing in private equity is kind of what I'm thinking you're talking about. So when you're really looking at bringing in private equity to accelerate, your business to the next level, the number is way less important than the culture and the partnership with. And so, the number right now means so much less than the number and your lifestyle and your the experience in 5 to 10 years, or or even to get it to that 4x. So being patient and being clear is really good, that you pick the right partner, and I wish you the best in your selection. What excites you though about growth? And maybe you can think about, people get to your point in your career, and they make a decision. A lot of them make the decision to exit, take the capital, and do something different, right? And so that's one way you could go. But it sounds like something's keeping you around, and you want to go to 60 to 100 million or 75 to 100 million. So what excites you about growth?
I really like that question, because when I actually started, I wanted to exit. And
Yeah.
the reason I wanted to exit is because there's been a lot of waves where I haven't been able to take advantage. So we had the cannabis wave. I didn't do anything with that because I'm doing this. We had the solar panel wave. I didn't do anything with that because I'm doing this. Now we've got AI. I'm not doing anything with that because I'm doing this. So part of the idea was sell it off and then wait for the wave. I know a lot of intelligent people, and then I'll jump on that. And then the little man that lives inside my stomach said, don't do that. You've spent 20 plus years in this industry. You've got all of that knowledge. You've got all of these connections, all of these relationships, you've got a good reputation. You know what you're doing. You feel comfortable. Do you really want to put that in the recycle bin and then start at, level 1? And I said, no, I don't want to do that. What's a lot more exciting to me, and it's funny, ever since I got my first sales job, it was never about the commission. It was always a game to me. It was always a game. I just wanted to win. I never cared about the
You're
money.
resonating with my audience, the growth game. That's why I named it the growth game. I love it.
Yeah.
It's so well said.
Yeah.
You're trying to tool the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
It was always a game. I just always wanted to win. And, and that's kind of where I'm at now is, I want to win that next game. So the next game is to grow to that next tier. And that's what I'm excited about.
That's excellent. Thank you you articulated that perfectly. So let's do this with closing question. So many of my clients are people who have been in the business, been in the industry, but have generally worked for somebody else, whether that's large corporate or even other mid-sized firms. But they get to a place in their career where they just decide, "Well, I want to try this myself." And some of them are also young entrepreneurs who have maybe dabbled in something close to this industry. Now they're having to make a decision. And, a big part of my audience is going, can I do this myself? Should I do this myself? Should I become an entrepreneur? So what would you say as advice to somebody that's contemplating starting a staffing company?
Starting a staffing company. I mean, if you think you can do it, I would say do it. I usually get a different question, which is, you've made the decision to become an entrepreneur. Now what?
Yeah, well said.
And so if that's the case, I tend to avoid the cliches, which is believe in yourself, never give up, do all that kind of thing. Right. So I have two pieces of advice. Get your MBA and implement EOS. I think if you do those two things, your chances of success in running an organization is going to be very high. So that's what I would say.
That's great. That's excellent advice. And I've seen a lot of successful people who have done that. So that's great. Well, this has been a great time. I really appreciate our conversation. It's really been enjoyable, and we definitely wish you the most success. You've got some very fun, interesting things coming up in your business career, and we here will be rooting for your success. And thank you so much for ourselves and for our audience to join the growth game today, Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, so that's Paul DeLuca wrapping up another episode of the Growth Game podcast. We very much appreciate the time we had from Nicholas Capman, and what a great business and a specialized business that he's been very successful at. We're confident that there's been a lot of great things that we can match and implement in our own careers. So until next time, that's another wrap of the Growth Game podcast.